Cam, welcome to the Building and Growing podcast. We're delighted to have you here today.
It's great to be here, Lucas. Thanks for having me, mate.
You're most welcome. After all, featuring on your podcast was the first podcast I ever did and gave me the inspiration to start my own.
Yeah, well, there you go. You must have been our third or fourth guest, I think, on Weird Growth. And, so thank you for helping us kickstart that all those years ago.
No worries. That's it. I mean, it was a great thing to do in the pandemic, and times have changed since then.
Do you know what? You were the first person I actually met in person that had COVID.
Yeah,
because you were fresh off the plane from England. You were probably one of the first planes that was even allowed to come back to Australia.
That's right. Yeah,
and everyone wanted to know what it was like.
Exactly.
Now everyone knows.
Yeah, and we were talking about actually doing part of the podcast on COVID, and I think I chickened out because it was still kind of a taboo back then.
Yeah, well. It's a bit of a tired topic now, isn't it? Everyone's been over it.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, we've moved on to hyperinflation and petrol prices and whatnot.
We live in exciting times.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, Cam, again, thanks so much for planting that seed that's, ultimately brought us together again today. Do you want to do a quick introduction to yourself and your background just to kick things off?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. So I'm Cam Sinclair, started Ammo Marketing 9 years now. We're having a party this Friday to celebrate Ammo's 9th birthday.
Indeed.
Ammo is a growth marketing agency for tech startups.
Yes.
And started originally on my own as a freelancer, just sort of plugging in as the growth guy into tech businesses around Western Australia. And kind of figured out that was a nice little niche to hone in on. And there was a lot of founders out there who are really technically amazing or have a great business but don't necessarily know how to take it to the next level with growth marketing.
Indeed.
And so that's why I started Ammo, I think, as well, was we saw these small early stage businesses going to traditional agencies, getting hit up for 30 grand for a branding project, and then being left to their own devices and not knowing actually what to do.
Indeed.
From an actionable marketing point of view to grow their business. And so I love working with innovative people who want to change the world.
Yes.
I'm not a technical person myself from like a programming or coding point of view. But my background is in politics and election campaigns. So prior to Ammo, that's what my career was. And I knew I always wanted to start some business of some type somehow. And I was always a bit of a tech nerd, gadget guy, and this was my way of contributing to that industry.
Indeed. Fantastic.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of similarities between politics and, marketing, which are brought together by, let's say, the funnel.
Weirdly enough, it's true. Yeah. I mean, the thing about politics, at least in Australia, is voting is compulsory. So everyone's your customer. So that's probably not that similar. But what is similar is you're taking a very, quite often a complex idea of a policy or something that you're trying to do at a government level and distilling it down into a short, sharp message which appeals to changing people's behaviour.
Yes.
And so that's the interesting thing about tech in general as well, is it's usually a new concept. It's a change of business model. You're trying to change people's behaviour. That's one of the hardest sort of things that you can do in marketing.
Indeed.
And so I guess there is a lot of similarities as well, where political campaigns generally don't actually have a whole lot of resources, in Australia at least.
Yes.
So you're trying to have a very high, maximise your impact using as fewer resources as possible. And so that's definitely something that startups have in common.
Yeah, indeed. And look, I mean, I think the timing of when you founded Ammo Marketing, really was quite, let's say, at the same time that, tech started to emerge in Perth.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but I think that concept of, hey, anyone, if they put their mind to it, can go and have a crack at being a founder. That idea really started to emerge in Perth at about that time.
Yes.
And it started to be a bit of a trendy industry. And yeah, I think Ammo was probably the first agency that focused in on that industry as our niche.
Indeed.
And so I think that was the thing which was compelling about what we were doing, was we were saying no to other types of clients and just focusing on that, and that's what made us successful in the space.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, 9 years on, you're not necessarily in the day-to-day of the business anymore. You've appointed Jack, as a great general manager. Can you talk about sort of some of the key success factors across those 9 years and how the business grew from you sort of plugging in as a growth guy to, being a fully fledged agency with a portfolio of clients?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Well, I think one of the key things was having that startup mentality, like living and breathing the world that our clients were in.
Yes.
As being as close to them as possible and trying to run the business in that style as well. So that meant being as flexible as possible, agile, taking each opportunity as it came.
Yeah.
And then understanding that you need to try to productize your offerings as well. You can't be all
Indeed.
things to all people. You'd need to say no a lot because it's counterintuitive. But if you do try to do everything for everyone, then you'll be nothing to anybody, right?
Indeed.
So I took a lot from our clients that they were trying to build products which served a very tight niche initially. It was quite a good growth strategy, I think, is to get that beachhead very early on for a very hyper niche and then try to expand from there.
Indeed.
And so that's what we were able to do, I think, by just focusing on tech startups. And then I think it was about people. We were very conscious of creating a culture here, which, as I said, lived and breathed our clients' world, but also avoiding the pitfalls of corporate culture, trying to stay flexible and not wearing a suit and tie to work and just getting things done as opposed to like being very rigid with a process or overly structured and corporate in the way that we operate. So, I think it was that combination of the culture, living and breathing the client's world, and then building a great team of curious, smart, fast-moving individuals. Yeah. And then the rest kind of evolved from there, I suppose.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. And, you made a really good point before about just being very precise and focusing in on a niche because ultimately it ties in with what you said at the beginning when it came to communication and messaging. Simplify the message and then it will resonate more with people. We focus on marketing for tech companies. Boom.
Yeah, correct.
Great way to start.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And it makes it easier to sell as well because you know exactly who your clients are.
Yes, yeah, that's it. And you can really clearly define the top of the funnel then instead of, saying, actually, we think we can bring everybody in.
Yeah.
Every client in Perth.
Yeah, bang on. Yeah.
Fantastic. And look, I that's been a fantastic intro to Ammo Marketing, a fantastic story. You mentioned that you were involved in the political space. So could you tell us more about your involvement in politics?
Certainly, yeah. I think over the time working in politics, I worked on about 14 different campaigns, including one in the US as well.
Nice.
And I think the attraction there came from, I studied economics at uni and, from that age, I suppose, realising that actually what governments do does impact people in their lives.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of people who go, oh, well, what the government does doesn't really, affect me. Why should I care about politics?
Yeah.
But I think, especially in a Western democracy like ours, everybody does have has the right and the privilege and almost the responsibility to be involved in that in some way and have their say. So that was why sort of attracted me to politics. And at the time, the government in Australia was a Labor government, big spending. They wanted to be involved in your life at all levels and aspects.
Yes.
And it felt oppressive almost. It almost felt like someone, more young people like us should stand up to that style of over government, if that makes sense. So I got involved, I guess, as like a student activist. We had at the time, the communications minister wanted to introduce an internet filter in Australia, like a China-style filter of every packet of information coming to Australia would be filtered by the federal government.
Yeah.
And it just infuriated me. So I ran campaigns on campus against that sort of thing. That got the attention of a few politicians in town,
Yes.
and ended up sort of volunteering on election campaigns,
Yeah.
and then got a job in a member's office as well. So
Fantastic.
got into the professional arm.
Yeah,
Ended up wearing
indeed.
a suit and tie, going from wearing sneakers and jeans.
Yeah, excellent. And look, could you dive in to sort of, maybe some of those 14 different campaigns that you worked on?
Yep.
Because I suppose most of the audience has been on the receiving end of these campaigns, but they don't know the structure and the process behind them.
Yeah, no, it is it's an interesting thing because, as you say, we were all on the outside and we just see the final product, but it's probably scrappier than what you probably imagine, these organisations. And ultimately, as I was alluding to before, it's about identifying who the people whose mind needs to be changed.
Yes.
Because you're not going to be able to communicate all things to all people. So who are what we call in Australia at least swing voters?
Yes.
What demographics, what do they look like? What are their behaviours and interests and beliefs?
Yes.
And then what are the messages that they need to hear in order to change their minds, or at least to sway them towards your side of thinking and ultimately vote for your side of the fence?
Yes.
And so it's a big data play in a lot of ways.
Indeed.
Political parties have the access to what's called the electoral roll, so every enrolled voter.
Yes.
You have details like their name, address, date of birth, and then you can build your own data layers on top of that. And so using research, both qualitative and quantitative, so focus groups, but also surveys and polling and things like that, and start building a picture of what actions from a marketing point of view you need to execute on.
Yes. Fantastic.
And so I guess the fascinating thing about that is there's just the full array of advertising channels at your disposal for a political party. Because everyone, is your audience essentially. So you can go from TV, radio, billboards, all the way down to super targeted mail. Eventually we were able to have digital social tools, email, SMS, through to door knocking and community grassroots campaign stuff. So you've got this myriad of tactics.
Yeah.
And the art of it is figuring out, which ones of those are going to be best impact.
Yes. You
kind of need to do all of them in some way, shape or form, but then also to maximise the reach into those target audiences that you have.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, you packed a lot in there. Yeah. All right, so let's go back to, let's say, the swing voters. You've identified those swing voters through some of those focus groups. Is that how you would identify the swing voters?
Yeah, usually it would be a little bit the other way around. So we would probably have some polling done via maybe phone or something along those lines.
Yep.
And that would start to flesh out some of the issues that are important to people.
Yes.
So you'd ask, of these 10 issues, which one's the most important to you? Which one would change your vote? Which one are you going to be voting on? You would probably ask them what their current political preferences are. And we'd be looking for signals which show that those people aren't decided 100% who they're going to be voting for.
Yes.
So you'd correlate those weaker voters. So I don't know who I'm voting for, or I may vote for this party, with the issues that those people most care about. And then you'd start to be able to draw some sort of correlations there about, okay, well, it's law and order. These people aren't feeling safe in their communities.
Yes.
And these are the ones who are looking for the party that's going to fix that issue for them, for example. And maybe they're women 45 to 55 who care about law and order. Okay, so then you start getting some specific tactics that you can help to drive a different voting behaviour by getting maybe some mail directed to people who are 45 to 55 female households, and you can do some specific mail just to those addresses. So then you can pull a data set out of that electoral roll that we're talking about and just target those people. Then you might use that list to create a Facebook audience and target them with some videos about how your party is fixing law and order issues or whatever that might be.
Indeed.
So from a technical point of view, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then probably getting a little bit more into the weeds, what you might run then is a focus group from that cohort of people, from maybe some marginal electorates as well that you're looking to pick up. and then you might draft up some of those Law and Order mail pieces or a brochure or a video,
Yes.
and put that in front of a room full of 10 women 45 to 55.
Yes.
And ask them, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
Is this what you would expect, or what else would you like to see here?
Mm-hmm.
And so then you can get down at a very granular level around the content and the wording and the pitch of that piece of material
Yes.
to maximize its effectiveness when you do go out and put it in the field.
Fantastic. And so after you've gone out and, distributed the message, put it in the field, how do you measure it?
Great question. So the phone polling that we were talking about earlier,
Yes.
what happens during an election campaign in particular is what's called a track.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might start off with a large sample size of, say, 1,000 in an electorate.
Yes.
And then what you might do is a 200 sort of sample size once a week or a couple of days or even daily, getting closer to election day.
Yes.
And
yes.
the amazing thing is when you can start seeing a shift in the direction that you hypothesized based on the tactics that you're using.
Indeed.
So yeah, it is measurable, but ultimately the only measure is what happens on election day.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, that's a fantastic little playbook that we can create now about, political marketing. And thank you for talking us through that process.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And I guess like the lesson there is find ways to complete that loop.
Yes.
That data feedback around like what your assumptions are, but also put the effort into getting the content and the targeting right to suit the message to change the behaviour.
Yes.
Because going too broad and too generic, you're not going to get that data loop feedback. If you do, it might be from a different type of noise as opposed to the actual behaviour that you are doing yourself. Yeah,
indeed. And look, in terms of your work in the political space, what has been your biggest achievement?
I mean, the thing is, it's a team sport, so I can't claim any specific achievement. But I suppose working on the Lord Mayor's campaign here in Perth, Basil Zemplis, was probably a really enjoyable and rewarding experience. He is doing an incredible job as the Lord Mayor at the moment in Perth. Changing the city into a global city with a great profile, and there's a lot of energy and light, I suppose he would say, in the city at the moment, compared to a few years ago when things were feeling a little bit the opposite of that. So that's been pretty great to be a part of. Yeah. But yeah, I think every campaign has its own sort of highlights.
Yes.
And working in the US during the 2014 midterms, I think it was really incredible, an eye-opening experience as well.
Really? Yeah. Well, what made it different over in the US compared to the work you did here?
Yeah. Oh, well, look, we're very lucky in Australia where our political system is reasonably homogenous across the country.
Yes.
So different states don't have different rules about who can vote and things. The US has quite a complex political, a college system, and the way that boundaries of electorates are drawn changes state by state. Each state has its own voting process. Yeah. Then we went to Kentucky and saw where they had like a marble system where you could drop a marble into a tube to decide who you voted for.
Far out.
You've heard about the hanging chads, the punch cards in Florida.
No.
It's quite amazing how it is the United States. That every state is almost its own little country in the US.
Fragmented.
Yeah. And also polarised as well, I think, because it's not compulsory to vote there. And I mean, Australia is unique almost in the world with compulsory voting, but you can see the difference in that when you have non-compulsory voting, you're almost trying to be more and more extreme to mobilise your base to get out and vote for you, particularly in the midterms. So whereas in Australia, where it's compulsory, it's almost like who can be more central and more sensible, I suppose, and less extreme. Yeah. So I think that's the disappointing thing about the US system is you do get this sort of almost obsession with weird issues like abortion and guns. Yeah. Whereas, here we're genuinely talking about issues that affect most people's lives day to day.
That's right. And I think one interesting lever that, let's say political parties try and pull in the US is to influence, let's say, voters of other parties not to vote.
Right. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Whereas
exactly.
here, that wouldn't happen. No one's going to cop a fine, just because they're like, oh, I don't want to vote today.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's all about the democracy sausage here in Australia.
Indeed, indeed, yeah. So look, the one of the sort of first things that we connected on a few years ago was, your podcast called Weird Growth.
Yep.
And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what led you to start the podcast and, how it's been going.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Well, I think early on, especially 9 years ago, the sort of conventional wisdom was if you want to grow your online presence and your website traffic and things, you would write blogs. You would write lots and lots of blogs with SEO juice in it to try to show up when people search on Google. So you're almost trying to trick Google into showing your website on its search results. And I just never really liked that form of 1,200 word essay writing.
Yeah.
It just always felt a little like I didn't really believe that people would even read it. And secondly, it didn't feel right trying to trick Google into giving people an odd user experience just to get traffic to your website.
Yeah.
But what I really did want to do was share knowledge and help our potential customers.
Yes.
And also try to bring out some of the little nuggets of wisdom that we would get every day when we talk to customers about what was working in their business. We'd have these fascinating, like, one-on-one conversations about these, like, strange little things which just unlocked growth in their business, which was unexpected.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have possibly planned for, but it was the key to unlocking growth for their business.
Yes.
But no one else was getting to be privy to that conversation. So I thought, well, I enjoy having these conversations. I suck and I don't like writing. Why don't we do this new thing called podcasting? And it wasn't that new at the time, but I suppose it was, not everyone was doing it just yet.
Yeah.
And it was something that I, much would just enjoy. I can show up. Louis would come and record it. I can have a chat for an hour, and then that part of my job's done. I can go and focus on other things.
Yes.
So that was the real reason. And it was also nice to give our clients and partners and people that we liked a bit of a platform because that content would tap into their network as well.
Indeed.
So that was the real reason. And then as we went along, we discovered other benefits. So you could snip up some of those podcast episodes into really useful little 30-second like nuggets of wisdom, which you can share on social channels.
Indeed.
Which I know that you do really well as well.
Yeah, thank you.
You can turn the transcript into like a nice kind of summary of these are the topics and these are the lessons that were learned.
Yeah,
as opposed to a massive long like transcript. It's like these are the sort of real pieces of information that are valuable.
Indeed.
And it's good to give people, like we found that clients, quite often it's the first time they've ever done something like this.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit nerve-wracking for them. But then when they do it, it's actually really fun and enjoyable.
Yeah.
It gives them confidence to go and do other things like that as well.
I remember when I did the one with you, I was super worried when I did it and kind of, breathed a sigh of relief once it came out because I was like, far out, actually, it went all right.
As it turns out, like most people are really good at it because most people enjoy talking about themselves.
Yes,
so
indeed.
It's actually not that difficult. It's speaking and publicly and even recording is only really difficult and nerve-wracking when you're not actually full bottle on what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But everyone's an expert in themselves.
Yes.
So it's actually not a very difficult thing for them to do.
That's right. Yeah, fantastic. And look, one question that I often get is, how does a podcast help, let's say funnel conversion or win new business? And so I'm going to, politely sort of flip that question over to you
cool.
because, you've been doing it for years now. So what sort of business impact do you think the podcast has had?
Well, I think if anyone's doing it for performance marketing purposes, they're probably going to be disappointed.
Indeed, yeah.
You can't record one episode of a podcast and put it on the internet and expect that you're going to start getting business straight away.
Yeah.
It's just like blogging was and probably maybe still is. It's a long play. Mm-hmm. And we kind of talk about, although, we're a growth marketing agency, we kind of talk about the dark funnel where we know that by being useful, putting good vibes out there in the universe, as woo-woo as that sounds, creating quality content, being consistent, being professional, being polished, doing that over a long period of time, good things will happen.
Indeed.
And it's not just podcasting on its own. It's being involved in the community. It's mentoring. It's doing public talks for free about useful topics that help people in their job.
Yeah.
It's sharing quality content. That creates a wall of it creates a critical mass of information that gets out through multiple channels, which demonstrates that you can be trusted.
Yes.
You're an expert in your field.
Yeah.
That you're consistent, and then it's a reminder of the brand and what you stand for over time.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a really concise summary of it, because I was talking to a client about it, and I said sometimes people don't necessarily message me until after they've seen quite a few videos.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, the trust has been built up, and then they feel comfortable to reach out. And so, I think that's a really good way of summarizing it.
Yeah, no, trust is a very important word. Yeah, spot on, mate. And I think the other aspect is not everyone's ready for if you're a business-to-business service provider or a consultant or whatever that is, not everyone's ready to engage you straight away. In fact, not many people will be.
Yeah.
In that Goldilocks zone where they're like they're like hair on fire looking for someone like you right now.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you can at least start sowing the seeds and generating that trust and demonstrating you're an expert over time, it's going to become a snowball effect.
That's right. Indeed.
Yeah.
So look, I guess, we've discussed the podcast now. Any sort of tips about, multi-channel marketing, whether that's a podcast or something else for founders?
Yeah. I guess the one other thing to consider or to know is that just because you create content across multiple channels doesn't mean that they're all going to work for you.
Indeed.
The likelihood is there will be 2 or 3 that are the best fit for you and your business and your customers.
Yeah.
And doing all of them at the same time is actually a good thing, but keep in mind that there's probably only going to be a handful of them that are going to really work. Yeah. And then over time, you're going to want to probably hone in on doing those 2 or 3 really well.
Yes.
As opposed to trying to do all of them not very well in a kind of mediocre way.
Indeed. And that's really where you should let the data and the stats do the talking for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And having said that, if it's easy and frictionless to do it across multiple channels, fine, do it. For podcasting, for example, it's easy to upload your episodes to Anchor FM and it pushes out to all the channels. Great, but that's your podcast channel.
Yes.
What we've found is LinkedIn is probably still the best for organic reach and beyond our own existing networks.
Yeah.
But it takes a little bit of effort to write a quality post and to choose what content to post.
Yes.
But it might only need to be once a week, and that's plenty.
That's right. Yeah. I read an article the other day, and somebody was really just focused on quality. They said you can do a post on LinkedIn, you can do a video on LinkedIn. By the time you cut it up into a reel or a short format for Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, you might get more impressions, but are they relevant and quality impressions? And will you get the connections that you'll get from LinkedIn?
Yeah. And again, it's horses for courses, because if you're a fast-moving consumer, item, or, like a $10 cap is your product, well then like speed and like a large amount of content over time is going to be important.
Indeed.
But if you're like a high value sort of slow sales process type, business to business product or service, then slow and steady will win the race over time.
Indeed. Fantastic. And Cam, look, nowadays you're doing a little bit of project work. Do you want to talk about that and what your sort of personal roadmap is?
Sure. Well, I think after 9 years of running Ammo, it's been a fantastic learning process, and it's been a super rewarding business to run.
Yeah.
And I'm still very much involved in it. but just not on the day-to-day.
Yes.
So we've got a wonderful team at Ammo. Jack stepped up to be the general manager. We've got some really talented designers and growth marketers and content creators that we work with. But it does feel like the time's right for a fresh challenge.
Yes.
I've actually taken a few months off just to step back and have a think about what that fresh challenge is, with no preconceived notions of what it might be. So it's really exciting time actually, because it could be anything. I've been dabbling in Bubble, building little apps and things just for fun, just to sort of keep the tools sharp.
Yeah, fantastic.
Nerding out on OpenAI products and the API there.
Nice.
And just having as many conversations with people, still very much in the tech startup space.
Yeah.
But looking for things that I can do to contribute. I'm still, I feel there's probably a business in me somewhere as well. I don't know where that's going to come from, but that might come later.
Yeah.
But at the moment, finding ways that I can be helpful. I think running and growing a business has taught me a great deal, and I think I can share some of that wisdom beyond the growth marketing stuff as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm open to suggestions, and I've seen the work that you do with engaging with companies and helping with the growth marketing stuff, and that's very inspiring and lovely as well, where you can go into a business, share your expertise, make a big difference, and then leave that business much better off than what it was when you joined, and then move on to the next thing. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, I think that really transitions well into the final question, which is, the top 3 takeaways that you would give for founders in general, based upon, your years of expertise.
Culture eats strategy.
Yes.
I know that's an old idiom, but it's absolutely true. Because especially in what we do, where you don't know necessarily the destination of where you're going in the startup space, you need to have the environment and the people in that environment with the right attitudes to succeed. Yeah, that are going to take the general direction that you set as a leader, and are going to find ways to make it happen regardless of what is thrown up in front of you. So it sounds a little bit broad, but if you can have something where people wake up in the morning and bounce out of bed looking forward to the challenges that they face ahead, you've created that environment for them to do that in, then you are going to be successful.
Yes.
Or you're far more likely to be successful than if you don't have that. So that's one.
Fantastic.
Number 2 is probably going back to the niche thing, but thinking about what is that tight, very specific product or service that you can offer without trying to be all things to all people.
Yes.
So for example, at Ammo, like the starting point for any new client that we work with is a growth strategy workshop. Yeah. Which is a very sort of clear, specific process which we take our clients through, and they pay for it. Yeah. And it gives them a lot of value up front. But then it sets the tone for the relationship, and it teaches it helps us really get a deep understanding of clients, but also teaches them about how we operate, and what to expect from us. So I think that being clear about the process for customers to go through, even if you're in a services business, is really powerful as well.
Indeed.
So then you've got culture and people and process. Yeah. And what's the third? I think it's probably from that marketing point of view where having that really deep, close understanding of your customers, and then transferring that into what is the quality content that they need to see and how to get them in front of it. Yes. At its core, that's what marketing is. Yeah. And so if you can be clear on, it actually starts with the customer, it starts with a deep understanding of them, then a lot of things will probably become obvious from there.
Indeed. Yep. Fantastic.
Point of view. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, 3 really great takeaways. Thanks, culture eats strategy. Love it. Second one, focusing on, the process, particularly as a services business. And then the third one, just, being really precise about the messaging. So, thank you. Look, Cam, anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
A couple of things. So Weird Growth would be great if you enjoyed, what your content is. with a bit more of a tactical marketing
Yes.
and an earlier stage startup point of view, the Weird Growth podcast. You can check it out at weirdgrowth.com.
Yes.
We have a little tool called MyFunnel,
Okay.
which helps startup founders with the starting point of what they should do for marketing.
Okay.
Founders get bombarded with advice and different ideas and tactics to use from a marketing point of view.
Yeah.
Myfunnel.com.au will help you whittle that down into a bit more of a tight kind of list of actionable things that you can do based on your specific startup,
Yes.
and who your customers are and who your market is. And then finally, check out ammo.marketing to find out more about how we operate if you're interested, and maybe check out some of the, you can get to the Weird Growth episodes from there as well.
Indeed, yeah. Well, look, Cam, thank you so much for sharing those, and
Pleasure,
I can attest to the quality of the Weird Growth podcast, and actually look forward to having a look at myfunnel.com.au.
Magic, mate. Thank you so much for having me on, and all the best. Appreciate
You're
it.
most welcome. Thanks so much, Cam.
See you,
Cheers.
mate.